welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. I want to start out today's video by sending another quick shout out, this time to my man Brad, who lives in the upstate of South Carolina. He's a big Clemson fan, wanted me to say, go Tigers. I always love having as many Clemson fans as I can here on the channel. And speaking of subscribers, back in my Thursday video, I sent a shout out to my man Bob, who lives in Clemson, and he messaged me either on Thursday night or maybe it was early Friday morning and told me that he saw his shout out and it was probably the best shout out that anybody could have ever got, and he appreciated it. And I told him thanks for subscribing, and he told me that even though it's very obvious by my clothes usually and the studio that I'm in that I'm a Clemson fan, but he did appreciate the fact that I'm not a Clemson homer and I'm very objective and very unbiased. And I told him I appreciated the kind words because that is my intent. I want people to know what teams I like in whatever sport I'm talking about, but I want everybody to know that even though I like that team, I don't show favoritism towards that team. I see the good and I see the bad, because you should never be so in love with your team that you never see the bad, but you should also not be so negative towards your team that you never see the good. So I try to be down the middle and call things just like I see them. So I did tell Bob I appreciated the kind words. Hopefully Brad will see the same thing, and I hope everybody sees that as well. That is my intent here on the channel. And today we're going to be talking about all the games from yesterday of relevance that are worth talking about. And I have one quick comment about the late Friday night game that featured a top 10 team. But before I get into that, let me start out by saying I'm not going to talk about the game because I have not watched the entire game yet. The game lasted 4.5 hours, which is too long for a college football game to last. But it started at 7:30 and ended after midnight. And I have not watched the whole game because I watched the Braves' first NLCS game. But I will say this, it's not about the game, it's about the fans, and it's not meant to be a shot towards Tennessee fans. I'm just talking about it because I thought about it when I saw the end of the game last night. If you're a fan of a team, no matter who your team is, and you go to a game and you throw stuff on the field, stay home. There's no sense in that. When I was in middle school, when I was a wee little good-looking sexy lad, I never went to a game and thought, you know what, I'm mad at that guy, so I'm going to throw something on the field. And if I'm 9, 10, 11 years old and I don't think about that, as a grown man or a grown woman, that shouldn't cross your mind. If that crosses your mind, don't go. There's no sense in it. It's stupid. I know most of the Tennessee fans were doing it because I think they were mad because the referee said they were that short, which they were that short. But even if that's your intention, is because you're mad at that referee, you're putting harm into every player on both sides, every official, not just that one, but everyone, the security guards, the ushers. There's just no sense in it. So if that crosses your mind, don't go. And this past Friday night in Alabama, there was a high school game where 4 people got shot, and they have not apprehended the suspect or suspects yet. And then last Saturday night in Alabama, after the Tide loss, there was a shooting. It's just a game. If you get so into a game that you want to shoot somebody, don't watch. Life goes on. My wife tells me all the time that she's so glad that I can watch a sporting event and not get that upset, because so many people let their blood pressure just skyrocket because of a game. And yes, if you cut me, I bleed orange. Everybody that knows me knows I'm a Clemson fan. I mean, it's obvious. But I've never In all my 37 years, have I ever seen Clemson lose or a play that didn't go their way where I wanted to punch my TV or punch somebody or anything like that? There's just no sense in it. It's just a game. The sun will rise the next day. So if you're a fan of a team and you've ever gone to a game and you've thrown something on the field, you should be ashamed of yourself. And if you haven't, don't do it. It's uncalled for. It's not necessary. But like I said, I have not watched the game yet. I did see the final score, and it was not near as high scoring as anybody thought it would be. But I'm going to try my best sometime before the day is over with to watch the game and comment on it either tomorrow or Tuesday when I've watched the game in its entirety, not just the first 3 minutes and the last 5 minutes. But first comment about the weekend games is the Friday night game. Oregon won. They beat California by a touchdown. California's dreadful. They're now 1-5 on the season. So Oregon got off to that hot start. But as the years progressed, they have just progressively gotten worse every week. So they won't stay in the top 10 much longer. They'll probably wind up with 2 or 3 losses before the season's over with. Instead of getting better, they're getting worse as the year goes on. Oklahoma State beat Texas. They were down 24-13. They scored the game's final 19 points. I think it's clear now and it's obvious that Texas is one of those teams that gets extremely overrated every year because of their name. Every year they come out top 10, top 15, and everybody says, "Oh, Texas is back," and they go 7-5 or 8-4. Now, I think Sarkisian was the right hire, and I think he'll get them there if they give him time, but they're nowhere near where they need to be. They're terrible. They'll probably end up 7-5 or 8-4 again this year. But Bijan Robinson had another good game, and I mentioned in yesterday's video how good he is. He had another great game. The problem with Texas is when Bijan's not on the field, they can't move the ball. And he can't get the ball 75 times a game. So they've got to find some other way on offense to move the ball besides either throw it to Bijan or give it to Bijan every single play. But he had another great game. But Oklahoma State impresses me just because of the fact they never get a primetime TV spot. And by primetime, I mean the big noon kickoff game on Fox or the 7:30 primetime game on ABC unless they're playing Texas or Oklahoma. And the reason why they get the primetime spots in those games is because they're playing Texas or Oklahoma. So Oklahoma State never gets any credibility. They very rarely have any 4 or 5-star players. The best player they've had in the past decade was that receiver a few years back named Blackman. He was great. But outside of that, they don't have any great talent. Mike Gundy hardly ever gets any kind of praise for being a good head coach. But yet Oklahoma State continues to win 8 or 9 games every single year. They're still undefeated on the season. They may be in this week's top 10. Find out when the AP poll comes out. It may already be out depending on when you watch this video. We'll talk about that later on this week, probably either tomorrow or Tuesday. But Oklahoma State this year is just doing it differently because normally they're all about offense, and this year they're winning by defense. Offense makes just enough plays for them to win. Auburn beat Arkansas by 15. Bo Nix was 21 of 26 for 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've never been a big fan of Bo Nix. I've always thought he was overrated. But this year, under Mike Bobo's watch, he has progressively gotten better every week. He even lost his job earlier in the season. Came off the bench against LSU. And, of course, they came back and won that game. And then he struggled against Georgia, but every quarterback struggles against that great Georgia defense. But I think it's clear that Mike Bobo knows how to coach quarterbacks and knows what he's doing on offense. And I've got more on Mike Bobo coming up here in just a minute. But Cincinnati dominated again. Joey Gatewood was the quarterback for Central Florida, and you may recognize that game. He started his career at Kentucky didn't get to play, so he transferred to Auburn, and he was Bo Nix's backup last year. And then when Central Florida hired Gus Malzahn, he transferred from Auburn to Central Florida. Started this year as the Golden Knights backup, but their starter, Dylan Gabriel, got hurt. So Gatewood is now finally getting playing time, but Cincinnati won impressively again. They continue to dominate everybody. Michigan State still undefeated. They beat Indiana, but it was ugly. But they won. That's what it's all about. That's the name of the game, and it may have been ugly, but 6-0 is still 6-0. And LSU won 49-42 in a game where defense was optional. Neither team even attempted to play defense, especially in the second half. I think I saw that LSU's running back had 287 yards when the game was over, which I believe was the most Florida's ever given up to a running back. And he only had like 220 yards on the season going into that game. Now, if you like games with no defense, then go back and watch the whole game. But if you don't, at least go back and watch the last play of the first half, because Florida threw up a Hail Mary like most teams do at the end of the half, and the pass was caught for a touchdown back of the end zone, but LSU had 4 defenders around the one Florida receiver, and the LSU defenders looked like they were just standing there saying, is he going to catch this? I mean, none of them even attempted to tackle the receiver, knock the ball down, nothing. They just stood there. So LSU looks like they don't even want to play defense. And on a side note, for Florida, now I'm not putting much stock into it, but I will mention it. There's a rumor going around that Brent Venables is going to be the coach at Florida when and if they fire Dan Mullen, which is intriguing to me because I didn't know Dan Mullen was on the hot seat. I mean, Dan Mullen might leave willingly, but I didn't realize he was on the hot seat. But Brent Venables is one of those guys that every single time there's a head coach vacancy, his name gets brought up. And he's never even attempted to take one. He very rarely even interviews. But I think if he's ever going to leave Clemson to be a head coach, it's going to be a program that's set to win and win right now, because Brent Venables has said numerous times he does not like to lose. And he's already making millions of dollars at Clemson. He's making more as a DC than some head coaches are making, and it's because he's so good at being a defensive coordinator. But if he hates to lose, if he ever leaves Clemson to be a DC, it's going to be somewhere that's a top 5 or top 10 team, not somewhere where he's going to step in there and go 8-4, because I don't think he's going to want to do that. But I did want to throw that out there in case nobody has heard that. So apparently somewhere somebody's heard that either Dan Mullen's on the hot seat or Dan Mullen's going to leave. So I just wanted to bring that up to tickle your ear a little bit. But Purdue dominated Iowa. Purdue only has one running back on scholarship, which to me is just something I would have never dreamed. I mean, even Mike Leach, who throws the ball 95 times a game, has more than one running back on scholarship. But Purdue just dominated Iowa 24-7, and it really wasn't that close. But Purdue is now 4-2 this season, but it was either their 9th or 10th win over a top 5 team when they're unranked. So somehow, some way, when they play highly ranked teams, they show up. But outside of that, I mean, they're not bad, but they're just not great. They had a couple of successful seasons back when they had Kyle Orton and Drew Brees back at the turn of the century, but ever since then, they're pretty much like a 7-5 team. That's probably about where they'll be again this year. So they're not bad, they're just not great. But they made Iowa look bad. Of course, Kirk Ferentz came out earlier this week and said, we have no business being number 2. We're not the number 2 team in the country. We don't have the athletes to be number 2, and our margin for error is just so thin. And it was kind of obvious in that game, because I know I've brought it up on the channel this year, but Iowa's been winning because their defense has been so good. I think it was the Penn State game, either on Penn State's first drive or second drive. Iowa's defense forced a turnover. They got the ball inside Penn State's 10-yard line, lost 3 yards, but kicked a field goal. So even though they had negative 3 yards on offense, they got 3 points. So when you're putting up points, nobody looks at your total yards. But Iowa's offense is just average. But when your defense is forcing so many turnovers and giving you good field position, you usually end up scoring. But they had forced 20 turnovers in 6 games, which is about 3.5 a game. Yesterday, Purdue had 1, and that was inside the 1-yard line. So it really didn't matter. Iowa still had to drive the field, and their offense was terrible. Purdue's defensive line just dominated Iowa's offensive line, and it took away the pass game. And Tyler Goodson is a good running back, but when it's 2nd and long and 3rd and long the entire game, he's not effective at all. But Iowa will still probably be in the top 10. Find out when the AP poll comes out, which, like I said a while ago, it may already be out depending on when you watch this video. Northwestern, and the reason why I bring this up is back to my Mike Bobo conversation. Northwestern quarterback now is Ryan Hilinski, and you may recognize that name because he used to be the quarterback at South Carolina. Of course, he replaced Jake Bentley in 2019 and was very effective. And so many people thought he was going to be their starting quarterback in 2020, especially after Bentley transferred. And, of course, he never played. And everybody thought it was a Will Muschamp thing. And then Will Muschamp got fired mid-season, and Hilinski still didn't play. And maybe somebody knows the full story. I don't. I can just tell you what I know. I know that Hilinski didn't play, and I know that Bobo was asked numerous times, why he wasn't playing. And Bobo just said, no matter how talented he is, if he's asked to do certain things and he can't do those things, he won't play. But I never heard what those things were, but I'm assuming it was something in practice that he just wouldn't do because some people just don't take practice seriously. But apparently it wasn't a Bobo thing because he transferred to Northwestern and he started this year as their 3rd-string quarterback, and he's way more talented than the first 2 guys. But the first guy started about 3 games and he was terrible, so he got benched. The second guy got hurt, so now Hilinski's playing and he's putting up good numbers. But for him to leave South Carolina and go to Northwestern and be their most talented quarterback and still not play, it wasn't a Bobo thing. Apparently Hilinski is a good quarterback. He's talented, but he's just not a very good teammate off the field. But I know, seeing how quickly Bo Nix is slowly turning himself around, it's obvious that Mike Bobo knows what he's doing with an offense and with the quarterback. He may not be a good head coach. Well, may never know because he wasn't a fit at Colorado State. He just took the job because he wanted to be a head coach. He wasn't a fit there. He may be a head coach again one day. He may not be. But when he was at Georgia, their offense was top 10 in the country every single year, and they broke every single record on offense that you could break while he was there, and they ain't even sniffed being that good since he left. And Auburn's offense is progressively getting better every week. So Bobo may not be a good head coach, but you cannot question how good he is as an offensive coordinator and as a quarterback guru. Now, let's talk about Georgia a little bit. Not much to talk about, as a matter of fact. My pastor asked me Friday night what I thought the score would be, and I said 31-14, and which was a 17-point win, and Georgia won by 17. I missed it by 1 point with both teams. But it's about where I thought it would be. I thought, again, Georgia would score more than enough points to win because of their defense, which they did. But Kirby Smart said JT Daniels was throwing the ball in practice this week, and he was throwing the ball about 25 to 30 yards, which JT Daniels doesn't have the strongest arm, but he can throw the ball 55 to 60 yards. So if he's just now throwing the ball 25, 30 yards, that means he's at about 50%. And if he's just now 50% this far into the season, then it's clear he's not going to be totally healthy for the rest of the season. So do you bring him back after the bye week thinking he's, 55, 60%, or do you just keep rolling with Stetson? Because Stetson right now is your better option anyway, not just because he's healthy, and we know if JT comes back, he's going to get hurt again anyway. But Georgia is running the ball so good right now and so effectively, and Stetson helps you out with that because he can run the ball as well. So he gives you one more option in the running game. But if Georgia ever plays a team that puts 8 or 9 guys in the box and makes them throw the ball 50 times a game, then you need JT back because Stetson is not going to drop back 50 times a game against anybody that's any good and win. But as long as you're going to run the ball the way they are, Stetson's your best option because we know by now when JT runs, he looks like he's running in quicksand. He looks like he's running with 10-pound weights on each shoe. He just can't run. So as long as you're going to run the ball the way they are, effectively as they are, then Stetson is your better option anyway. But if JT is just now throwing the ball 30 yards, he's nowhere near healthy. So unless you want to bring him back at 50%, your best bet is just stick with Stetson. But of course, Georgia's off next week, so we'll find out in 2 weeks when they get ready for their always Halloween weekend matchup against Florida. And NC State won easily. I ain't going to say who, but there's this really good-looking guy that's wearing an orange shirt right now and an orange hat that before the season said NC State would be the second best team in the ACC, but they may end up being the best team in the ACC because they beat Clemson. So NC State is good, but I expected them to be good, but I didn't expect them to be quite this good. But they beat Boston College, and it wasn't close. So we'll see if NC State can continue their good play right now as they try to win their half of the ACC, known as the Atlantic Division. And if you're a baseball fan, the Braves won Game 1 of the NLCS last night. Austin Riley had a game-tying home run, and then he had the game-winning hit in the bottom of the ninth off of Blake Trinan. Max Fried pitched another good game, and the Braves had just enough offense to win the game. Game 2 is tonight. And, of course, over on the American League side, the ALCS has already played 2 games. It's Red Sox, 1 win, and Astros, 1 win. Any thoughts on any of the games, please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. A policeman spotted an elderly lady driving while knitting. "Pull over," he said. "No, it's a scarf," she replied. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.